The first thing Irving heard when he pushed open the door of the old Miller cabin was the sound of teeth chattering, rapid and uncontrolled, like the clicking of telegraph keys in the bitter January cold of 1883. He had been riding fence lines on the outer edges of the Rockingham Ranch when the blizzard rolled in from the north, one of those rare Texas storms that turned Fort Stockton into a frozen wasteland. And he had made for this shelter knowing it had been abandoned for months since old Jacob Miller died without heirs. What he did not expect was to find a woman huddled in the corner, wrapped in nothing but a threadbare dress and a shawl so thin it might as well have been made of spiderweb. "Jesus Christ," Isaiah breathed, his voice cutting through the howl of wind that followed him inside. He slammed the door shut against the elements and moved quickly, his eyes adjusting to the dim light filtering through gaps in the walls. The woman looked up at him with eyes so dark they seemed black in the shadows, her face pale as fresh snow, her lips tinged with blue. She could not have been more than 22 or 23, and she was going to die if he did not act fast. He dropped his saddlebags and moved with the efficiency of a man who had lived through harsh winters and knew the value of speed. "Can you stand?" he asked, but she only stared at him, her whole body shaking so violently that her head bobbed with the motion. Isaiah did not wait for an answer. He strode to the fireplace, noting with relief that someone had left a stack of wood beside it, probably from before Jacob died. The kindling was dry, and he had it lit within minutes, coaxing the flames with patient breath until they caught and began to spread warmth into the frozen space. Only then did he turn back to the woman. She had not moved, still pressed into that corner like a frightened animal. Isaiah pulled off his heavy coat and moved to her side, draping it over her thin shoulders. The coat swallowed her completely, and up close he could see that her dark hair was matted with ice crystals. Her bare feet were red and swollen, and her fingers looked like they might snap if bent. "I need to get you closer to the fire," he said gently, keeping his voice low and calm the way he did with spooked horses. "Can you move your legs?" She tried to speak, but her jaw was locked from the cold and only a strangled sound emerged. Isaiah made a decision and slipped one arm under her knees, the other behind her back, lifting her as carefully as if she were made of glass. She weighed next to nothing, and that worried him more than her silence. He carried her to the fireplace and set her down on the dusty floor, positioning her where the heat would reach her without burning. He worked quickly, pulling blankets from his bedroll and wrapping them around her, layering them until she looked like a cocooned butterfly. Then he filled his tin pot with snow he scooped from just outside the door and set it near the fire to melt. Warm water first, then maybe some of the jerky and hardtack from his supplies. He had to get her temperature up slowly or risk shocking her system. While the snow melted, Isaiah studied her face properly for the first time. Even half frozen and terrified, she was striking in a way that had nothing to do with conventional beauty, and everything to do with the fierce determination he could see flickering behind her eyes. She was watching him now with the wariness of someone who had learned the hard way that men could not be trusted, and he wondered what circumstances had brought her to this abandoned cabin in the middle of a blizzard. "My name is Isaiah Irving," he said, keeping his distance to avoid frightening her further. "I work for the Rockingham Ranch about 5 miles east of here. I am not going to hurt you. I just want to make sure you do not freeze to death." She watched him for a long moment, and then slowly, so slowly, she nodded. Her shaking had decreased slightly with the warmth, though she still trembled like a leaf in wind. Isaiah took that as permission to continue his ministrations. He added more wood to the fire, building it up until the flames roared and the cabin began to feel almost habitable. "Can you tell me your name?" he asked, checking the water. It was warm now, not hot, which was what he wanted. He poured some into his cup and brought it to her, helping her lift it to her lips with hands that were surprisingly gentle for their size and calluses. She took a small sip, then another, and finally she managed to speak, her voice barely above a whisper. "Tabitha. Tabitha Foster." "Miss Foster," Isaiah acknowledged with a slight nod. "How long have you been out here?" Her eyes flickered to the window where the blizzard continued its assault. "I do not know. Since yesterday morning, I think, maybe longer, everything blurred together." Isaiah felt a cold fury settle in his chest that had nothing to do with the temperature. Yesterday morning meant she had been here alone, without fire or adequate clothing, for at least 24 hours in conditions that had already claimed the lives of several head of cattle on the Rockingham. The fact that she was still alive was a testament to sheer stubborn will. "Where are you from?" he asked, settling himself a respectful distance away. "Fort Stockton." Tabitha shook her head, taking another sip of water. Her hands were steadier now, though still pale and trembling. "San Antonio. I came here with my uncle. He said there was work, that he had a claim on some land. But when we arrived, he told me the truth. He had sold me to a man named Garrett Hutchins, sold me like I was cattle." The words fell between them like stones into still water, and Isaiah felt his jaw tighten. He knew Hutchins by reputation, a wealthy landowner who lived north of town with a string of failed marriages and rumors that followed him like flies on rotting meat. "So you ran." "I ran," she confirmed, and for the first time, something like defiance sparked in her dark eyes. "I waited until they were drinking, until they thought I was asleep in the wagon, and I ran into the storm. I knew it was dangerous, but I would rather die free than live as that man's property." Isaiah respected that. He respected it more than she probably knew. "You did the right thing," he said firmly, "and you are not going back there, not while I am breathing." She looked at him with surprise, as if kindness from a stranger was a language she no longer understood. "Why would you help me? You do not know me." "Because it is the right thing to do," Isaiah said simply, "and because no woman deserves to be treated like merchandise." He gestured to the cabin around them. "This place has been empty since Jacob Miller died 3 months back. He had no family, no will, and the bank has not gotten around to claiming it yet. Far as I am concerned, you found it first. This place is yours now." Tabitha stared at him as if he had just spoken in a foreign tongue. "What? You heard me," Isaiah said, warming to the idea even as he spoke it. "You need a place to stay, somewhere safe where Hutchins and your uncle cannot find you. This cabin is miles from town, on the edge of ranch land. Most folks have forgotten it even exists. You stay here, lay low until spring, and by then we will figure out something more permanent." "I cannot just take someone's home," Tabitha protested, but her voice lacked conviction. She was looking around the cabin now with something that might have been hope struggling through the fear. "It is not stealing if there is nobody to take it from," Isaiah countered. "Jacob would not have minded. He was a decent man, and he would not have wanted to see you sold off like a slave." He stood, brushing dust from his trousers. "I will bring you supplies tomorrow. Wood, food, blankets. There is a well out back that should still be good, and the roof seems solid enough. It will be rough living, but it will be yours." Tabitha wrapped her hands around the tin cup, and Isaiah noticed that color was finally returning to her face. "I do not have money to repay you." "Did not ask for any," Isaiah said. He moved to his saddlebags and pulled out the jerky and hardtack, along with a tin of peaches he had been saving for a special occasion. This seemed special enough. "Here, eat something. Your body needs fuel to warm itself properly." She accepted the food with trembling fingers, and as she ate, Isaiah set about making the cabin more livable. He stuffed rags into the worst of the gaps in the walls, using mud from his canteen to seal them. He checked the chimney to make sure it was drawing properly, cleared away the worst of the dust and debris, and arranged his bedroll near the fire for her to sleep on. His horse was in the lean-to out back, sheltered from the worst of the storm, with enough hay from the stores Jacob had left behind. By the time he finished, full dark had fallen and the storm showed no signs of abating. Tabitha had eaten half the jerky and most of the peaches, and she looked almost human again, though exhaustion dragged at her features. "You should sleep," Isaiah said. "I will keep the fire going tonight." "Where will you sleep?" Tabitha asked, eyeing the single bedroll. "I have slept in worse places," Isaiah assured her. "The floor near the fire will be fine. I have done it plenty of times." She looked like she wanted to argue, but another wave of exhaustion swept over her, and she simply nodded. Isaiah helped her to the bedroll, making sure she was wrapped warmly, and then he settled himself against the wall with his saddle as a pillow. The fire crackled between them, a living thing that pushed back the darkness and the cold. "Isaiah," Tabitha's voice was soft, already half asleep. "Yes." "Thank you. For not leaving me here. For not asking for anything in return." Isaiah looked at her across the firelight, at this woman who had chosen death over slavery, who had survived a night in a blizzard through sheer determination, and felt something shift in his chest. "Go to sleep, Miss Foster. Tomorrow is going to be a long day." She did, almost immediately, exhaustion claiming her like a debt come due. Isaiah stayed awake, feeding the fire and watching the storm rage outside. He thought about Garrett Hutchins and Tabitha's uncle, about men who thought they could own other people, and he thought about the woman sleeping by the fire who had refused to accept that fate. The blizzard lasted 3 days. Isaiah stayed in the cabin with Tabitha, maintaining a respectful distance, keeping the fire burning and slowly bringing her back from the edge of death. On the second day, she could walk without assistance, though her feet were badly frostbitten and would need time to heal. On the third day, the storm broke, and the sun emerged to shine on a landscape transformed into a frozen wonderland. Isaiah knew he needed to return to the Rockingham, that his boss would be worried and wondering where he had gone. But he could not leave Tabitha defenseless, not yet. So he made the ride back to the ranch, collected supplies, and told his boss, Marcus Sullivan, a carefully edited version of the truth. He had found a woman half frozen in the old Miller cabin, he said, and she needed help. Marcus, who was as decent a man as Isaiah had ever worked for, did not press for details. He simply helped Isaiah load up a pack horse with food, blankets, tools, and other necessities. "She going to be staying there long term?" Marcus asked as Isaiah prepared to ride out. "I do not know yet," Isaiah admitted, "but she does not have anywhere else to go." Marcus studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "You are a good man, Isaiah Irving. Not many would go out of their way like this. You need time off to help her get settled, you take it. We will manage." Isaiah thanked him and made the journey back to the cabin, his heart lighter than it had been in years. When he arrived, he found Tabitha outside despite the cold, clearing snow from the path to the well with a makeshift broom she had fashioned from pine branches. She looked up at his approach and something in her face brightened, though she tried to hide it. "You came back," she said, and there was surprise in her voice that made Isaiah's heart clench. "Said I would, did not I?" He dismounted and began unloading the pack horse. "Brought you enough to last through the winter if you are careful with it. Food, blankets, some tools for repairs. There is a rifle too and ammunition. I will teach you how to shoot if you do not already know." Tabitha shook her head. "My father tried to teach me when I was young, but he died before I learned properly." "Then I will teach you," Isaiah said firmly. "Out here, you need to know how to protect yourself, from animals if nothing else." Over the following weeks, Isaiah found himself riding out to the cabin every few days, always with some excuse. He needed to check the roof, he told himself. He wanted to make sure the well had not frozen over. He should teach her how to shoot, how to trap rabbits, how to read the weather. The truth, which he was reluctant to admit even to himself, was that he simply wanted to see her. Tabitha was unlike any woman he had ever known. She had a quick mind and quicker hands, learning everything he taught her with an intensity that spoke of a deep need for self-sufficiency. She could shoot a tin can from 30 paces after only a week of practice. She learned to set snares and check them, to identify which plants were edible and which were poison, to read tracks in the snow. She worked on the cabin constantly, patching and repairing and improving until the drafty old structure became something almost cozy. But more than her competence, Isaiah found himself drawn to her company. Tabitha had a dry sense of humor that caught him off guard, a way of looking at the world that was both practical and poetic. She told him about growing up in San Antonio, about her father who had been a teacher before fever took him, about her mother who had died when Tabitha was born. Her uncle had been her only living relative, and she had trusted him when he said he would take care of her. "I should have known better," she said one afternoon as they sat by the fire, playing cards with a worn deck Isaiah had brought. "He always looked at me like I was a burden. I just did not think even he would sink that low." "You cannot blame yourself for someone else's evil," Isaiah said, studying his cards. "Some people are just rotten to the core, and there is no predicting it." Tabitha laid down a winning hand with a satisfied smile. "That is 3 games to 2. You owe me another shooting lesson." Isaiah groaned good-naturedly. "You do not need more lessons. You shoot better than half the men I know." "Then I will beat the other half too," Tabitha declared, and there was such fierce joy in her voice that Isaiah could not help but laugh. The laughter died when they heard horses approaching. Isaiah was on his feet instantly, his hand going to his gun. Tabitha's face drained of color, but she grabbed the rifle he had given her without being told, checking that it was loaded with practiced efficiency. "Stay behind me," Isaiah ordered, moving to the window. 2 riders were approaching through the snow, and even from a distance, he recognized the larger one. Garrett Hutchins, dressed in an expensive coat and riding a horse that probably cost more than Isaiah made in a year. The man beside him was smaller, older, with a weasel face that Isaiah immediately disliked. "That is my uncle," Tabitha whispered, her voice tight with fear and rage. "Henry Foster." Isaiah felt a cold calm settle over him, the same feeling he got before a gunfight or a dangerous horse. "Stay inside. Keep that rifle ready, but do not shoot unless I give the word or unless they try to force their way in." "Isaiah," Tabitha started, but he was already moving, stepping out onto the porch and closing the door behind him. The cold bit through his shirt, but he did not let it show. He stood with his feet planted, his hand resting casually near his gun, and waited for the riders to close the distance. Hutchins pulled up 10 feet from the porch, his eyes narrowing as he took in Isaiah's stance. Up close, he was a big man gone soft around the middle, with cold blue eyes and a mouth that looked like it had never smiled from genuine happiness. Henry Foster looked exactly like the rat he was, thin and nervous, his eyes darting everywhere except at Isaiah's face. "You are on my property," Isaiah said before either man could speak. It was a lie, but it was the kind of lie that might save lives if they believed it. Hutchins raised an eyebrow. "This is the old Miller place. Jacob Miller is dead and this land reverted to the bank. It does not belong to you." "I filed a claim," Isaiah said calmly. "Paid the back taxes. Bank was happy to let it go for what was owed. So I will ask you again, why are you on my property?" Henry Foster finally found his voice, though it came out as a whine. "We are looking for my niece, Tabitha Foster. She ran away from our camp during the storm. We have been searching for her, feared she might have frozen to death." "Feared," Isaiah repeated, loading the word with contempt. "That why you waited 3 weeks to come looking? That why you are riding with a man known for buying women off their relatives?" Hutchins's face darkened. "Watch your mouth, boy. I have more money and influence in this town than you will ever see. If I want this land, I will take it. If I want what is mine, I will take that too." "Nothing here is yours," Isaiah said, his voice dropping to a dangerous quiet. "And I am not a boy. I am a man who is very quickly losing his patience with trespassers." "She is here," Foster said suddenly, his eyes lighting up with greedy excitement. "Tabitha is in that cabin, I can feel it. She is my niece, my responsibility. She comes with us." "No," Isaiah said simply. "She does not." Hutchins leaned forward in his saddle, his hand moving toward his gun. "You are making a very big mistake. I paid good money for that girl. She is mine by right of contract." "You cannot own people," Isaiah said, and his hand moved to rest on his own gun. "We fought a war over that. Maybe you missed it." "This is different," Hutchins snarled. "Her uncle agreed to the arrangement. It is legal and binding." "It is slavery dressed up in legal words," Isaiah countered. "And it ends here. You want to draw on me, go ahead. But know that I am faster than I look, and even if you kill me, you still have to get through that door. And the woman behind it has a rifle and knows how to use it." For a long moment, the world held its breath. The only sound was the wind whistling through the bare trees and the creak of leather as Hutchins shifted in his saddle. Isaiah could see the calculation in the man's eyes, weighing odds and outcomes. Finally, Hutchins sat back, though his face was tight with fury. "This is not over," he said. "I will go to the sheriff. I will go to the judge. I will make sure everyone in Fort Stockton knows you are harboring stolen property." "You do that," Isaiah said. "And I will make sure everyone knows what kind of man you are, what kind of man buys a woman from her own family." "How many others have there been, Hutchins? How many women have disappeared into that ranch of yours?" The color drained from Hutchins's face, and Isaiah knew he had struck home. There were others. There had to be. And if Isaiah started asking questions, started poking into Hutchins's affairs, things would come to light that the man wanted buried. "We are leaving," Hutchins said abruptly, yanking his horse around. "But you have made an enemy today, Irving. That is something you are going to regret." Henry Foster lingered a moment longer, his face a mask of impotent rage. "She was always more trouble than she was worth," he spat. "You want her. You can have her and whatever problems come with her." Then they were riding away, disappearing into the winter landscape, and Isaiah stood on the porch until they were out of sight. Only then did he allow himself to relax, the tension draining from his shoulders like water. The door opened behind him, and Tabitha emerged, the rifle still in her hands. "You should not have done that," she said quietly. "Hutchins is dangerous. He has connections, money. He could ruin you." Isaiah turned to look at her, at this woman who had chosen freedom over safety, who had survived against all odds, and felt something settle into place in his chest. "Then let him try. You are not going back there. Not ever." Tabitha stared at him for a long moment, and then to his surprise, tears began to slide down her cheeks. Not sad tears, he realized, but something else. Relief maybe, or gratitude, or something more complex than either. She set the rifle aside and moved to him, wrapping her arms around his waist and pressing her face against his chest. Isaiah hesitated only a moment before returning the embrace, his arms coming around her and holding her close. She felt small and warm against him, and he could feel her heart beating fast against his ribs. They stood like that for a long time, two people who had found each other in the midst of a harsh winter, holding on as if letting go might shatter the fragile hope that had grown between them. When Tabitha finally pulled back, her eyes were dry, but there was something new in her expression. "Why are you doing this? Really? It cannot just be because it is the right thing. You could have pointed me toward town and washed your hands of me." Isaiah considered the question, turning it over in his mind. "When I was 14, he finally said, my mother died. Cholera. My father blamed me, said if I had gotten the doctor faster, she might have lived. He started drinking, and when he drank, he got mean. One night he came at me with a belt and I ran. Just like you did. I ended up at the Rockingham, and Marcus Sullivan gave me a job, gave me a place to sleep, and never asked for anything in return except honest work. He saved my life by showing me that not all men are like my father." He met Tabitha's eyes. "I guess I am trying to pass that forward. You reminded me that there are people worth saving, worth fighting for. And somewhere along the way, you stopped being just someone I was helping. You became important." The air between them seemed to thicken, charged with unspoken words and feelings neither was quite ready to name. Tabitha reached up and touched his face, her fingers cold against his cheek. "You are a good man, Isaiah Irving." "I am just a man," Isaiah said softly, "but I am trying to be better." They went back inside, and the rest of the day passed in a comfortable silence broken only by necessary conversation. But something had changed between them. A wall had come down or a door had opened, and they both felt it even if neither spoke of it. As winter deepened, Isaiah found himself spending more time at the cabin than at the ranch. Marcus noticed, but said nothing, just gave Isaiah knowing looks and made sure he had whatever supplies he needed. The other ranch hands teased him good-naturedly about having a sweetheart out in the old Miller place, and Isaiah did not deny it because it was starting to feel true. He and Tabitha fell into a rhythm, an easy partnership that felt as natural as breathing. They worked together on repairs and improvements to the cabin, adding a proper door latch, fixing the windows, building a small chicken coop behind the cabin, and filling it with hens Isaiah bought from a farmer outside town. Tabitha proved to have a talent for gardening, planning out where she would plant vegetables come spring, and Isaiah found himself looking forward to that future, to seeing what they would build together. The attraction between them grew slowly, carefully, like a seedling in uncertain soil. It showed itself in small moments. The way Isaiah's hand would linger on Tabitha's when passing her a tool. The way Tabitha would watch Isaiah when she thought he was not looking, her eyes soft with something that might have been wonder. The way they began to sit closer together by the fire in the evenings, their shoulders touching, their voices low as they talked about everything and nothing. It was Tabitha who finally bridged the gap. It happened on a cold February night when Isaiah had stayed late after a day spent chopping wood for her stores. They were sitting by the fire, and she was mending one of his shirts that had torn on a nail, her needle moving with practiced efficiency. "Isaiah," she said suddenly, setting the shirt aside. "Can I ask you something?" "Anything," he replied, looking up from the piece of harness he was repairing. "You have someone waiting for you, a woman back at the ranch or in town?" Isaiah shook his head. "No. Never seemed to find someone who fit, if that makes sense. Most women want a man with prospects, with land of his own and money in the bank. I am just a cowhand." "You are more than that," Tabitha said firmly. "You are kind and brave and good. Any woman would be lucky to have you." Isaiah set the harness aside and looked at her properly. "And what about you, Tabitha? What do you want?" She met his gaze steadily. "I want to feel safe. I want to wake up in the morning without fear. I want to build something that is mine that nobody can take away." She paused, then added softly, "And I want you to kiss me." The confession hung in the air between them, brave and vulnerable. Isaiah felt his heart kick against his ribs. "Tabitha," he started, but she cut him off. "I know it has only been a few months. I know we barely know each other in some ways, but I feel like I know everything that matters. I know you are honorable. I know you would never hurt me. I know that when you look at me, you see a person, not property." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "And I know that I am falling in love with you." Isaiah moved without thinking, closing the distance between them and cupping her face in his hands. "I have been in love with you since the moment you stood on that porch with a rifle, ready to fight for your freedom," he said. "I was just waiting for the right time to tell you." "This is the right time," Tabitha said, and then his lips were on hers, gentle and questioning and full of promise. The kiss started soft but deepened as they lost themselves in each other, months of tension and longing pouring out in the simple act of connection. Tabitha's hands came up to grip his shoulders, and Isaiah pulled her closer, marveling at how perfectly she fit against him. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Tabitha was smiling in a way he had never seen before, open and joyous and free. "Stay tonight," she whispered. "Not on the floor, with me." Isaiah searched her eyes, making sure this was what she truly wanted. What he saw there left no room for doubt. "Are you sure?" "I have never been more sure of anything in my life," Tabitha said. "I want this. I want you. I choose this freely, and that makes all the difference." They made love slowly, carefully, learning each other with patience and tenderness. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the narrow bed, the fire burning low, and talked in whispers until exhaustion claimed them. Isaiah held Tabitha as she slept, feeling her heartbeat against his chest, and thought that he had never been happier or more terrified. Because now he had something to lose, something precious and irreplaceable, and the world was full of men like Hutchins who would try to take it away. But when morning came and Tabitha woke in his arms with a smile that could have lit the sun, Isaiah decided that some things were worth the risk. Spring came slowly to Fort Stockton, melting the snow in fits and starts and turning the roads into rivers of mud. Isaiah had effectively moved into the cabin by then, spending his nights with Tabitha and his days working at the Rockingham. Marcus had raised his eyebrows but said nothing beyond. "You planning to make an honest woman of her?" Isaiah had been thinking about exactly that. He wanted to marry Tabitha, wanted to make their partnership official and permanent, but there were complications. Hutchins had made good on his threat to spread rumors through town, painting Isaiah as a thief and Tabitha as a runaway. The sheriff, a man named Tom Bradley who was in Hutchins's pocket, had come sniffing around once, but Marcus had vouched for Isaiah, and without concrete proof of wrongdoing, there was little Bradley could do. Still, the rumors persisted, making it difficult for Tabitha to come into town without facing hostile stares and whispered insults. It infuriated Isaiah, but Tabitha took it with surprising grace. "Let them talk," she said one evening as they worked in the garden, planting seeds for vegetables. "I know the truth, you know the truth, and that is what matters. Besides, I do not need Fort Stockton. I have everything I need right here." But Isaiah wanted more for her than a life of isolation. He wanted her to be able to walk into town with her head held high, wanted her to have friends and community, and all the things she deserved. So he began to formulate a plan. The opportunity came in late April when Hutchins made a mistake. He had gone into town drunk and started boasting about his women, about how many he had bought and sold over the years. Most people ignored him, used to his ramblings, but Isaiah happened to be in the general store when it happened, and so was the new preacher, a man named Reverend Samuel Wright who had just arrived from Dallas. Wright was young for a preacher, maybe 30, with sharp eyes and a stronger moral backbone than most men Isaiah had met. He listened to Hutchins's boasting with growing horror, and when the man finally staggered out, Wright turned to Isaiah. "Is what he said true?" Wright demanded. "Is that man really buying women?" Isaiah saw his chance and took it. "Yes, Reverend. And the woman I love is one of the ones who got away. He is trying to force her back, using the law and money to make her life hell." Wright's face hardened. "That is an abomination. Slavery is illegal in this country, no matter how he tries to dress it up. We need to do something about this." What followed was a whirlwind 2 weeks. Reverend Wright, it turned out, had connections throughout Texas. He began writing letters, making inquiries, and gathering information. He contacted other preachers, sheriffs in other towns, anyone who might have encountered Hutchins or heard rumors of his activities. What he found was damning. At least 7 women over the past 10 years had been bought from desperate relatives and taken to Hutchins's ranch. 3 had died under mysterious circumstances. 2 had escaped and disappeared. 1 had killed herself. Only 1 was still there, a Mexican woman named Maria who worked as a servant and was too terrified to leave. With this information, Reverend Wright went to the territorial marshal, a man named Clayton Ross who had a reputation for integrity. Ross came to Fort Stockton with 2 deputies and began a formal investigation. Isaiah testified, as did Tabitha, telling her story in a quiet, steady voice that left no doubt as to the truth. Other witnesses came forward, people who had seen or heard things but had been too afraid or apathetic to speak up before. The investigation took months, but in the end, Hutchins was arrested and charged with multiple crimes including human trafficking and murder. His trial became a sensation, drawing newspaper reporters from as far as San Antonio and El Paso. The evidence was overwhelming, and the jury took less than an hour to convict him. He was sentenced to hang, though the execution would not happen until the appeals process finished. Henry Foster, Tabitha's uncle, fled town before he could be arrested as an accessory. Last anyone heard, he was somewhere in Louisiana, and good riddance. The vindication was sweet, but more importantly, it cleared Tabitha's name. Suddenly, the women of Fort Stockton who had shunned her were falling over themselves to apologize, inviting her to quilting bees and church socials. Tabitha accepted their overtures with cautious politeness, but she never forgot who had stood by her when it mattered. With the cloud of scandal lifted, Isaiah felt free to move forward with his plans. On a warm June evening, with the garden in full bloom and the cabin looking more like a home than it ever had, he dropped to one knee in front of Tabitha and pulled out a simple gold ring he had saved 3 months of wages to buy. "Tabitha Foster," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "You are the strongest, bravest, most beautiful woman I have ever known. You have made me happier than I ever thought possible. Will you marry me?" Tabitha looked down at him with tears streaming down her face, but she was smiling so wide it looked like her face might split. "Yes," she said, her voice breaking. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." They married in July in the little church in Fort Stockton, with Reverend Wright officiating and what seemed like half the town in attendance. Marcus Sullivan stood up as Isaiah's best man, and a woman named Clara Jennings, who ran the boarding house and had become Tabitha's first real friend in town, served as maid of honor. Tabitha wore a dress Clara had helped her sew, simple white cotton with lace at the collar, and she looked so radiant that Isaiah felt his throat tighten with emotion. When the Reverend pronounced them husband and wife and Isaiah kissed his bride, the church erupted in applause. At the reception that followed, held in the church hall with food contributed by dozens of families, Isaiah danced with Tabitha until his feet ached and his smile felt permanent. "Did you ever think," Tabitha murmured as they swayed together, That day you found me half frozen in that cabin, that we would end up here." Isaiah thought about the shivering woman he had found in the corner, about the fire he had built and the words he had spoken. "This place is yours now." He had meant the cabin, but somehow those words had grown to encompass so much more. A life, a future, a love that felt big enough to hold the whole world. "No," he admitted, "but I am glad we did." They spent their wedding night in the cabin, which was truly theirs now. The bank had officially granted them the deed after Isaiah paid the back taxes and filed the proper paperwork. It was small and modest, but it was home, and they had built it together from the ruins of abandonment. Life settled into a comfortable pattern over the next year. Isaiah continued to work at the Rocking M, saving money with the dream of eventually buying land of their own. Tabitha tended the garden, raised chickens and sold eggs in town, and began taking in sewing work. She had a talent for it, and soon women from all over were coming to her for dresses and alterations. The money she brought in was modest but steady, and it went into the same savings jar as Isaiah's wages. In the spring of 1885, Tabitha discovered she was pregnant. Isaiah received the news with a whoop of joy that probably carried all the way to town, spinning Tabitha around until she laughingly begged him to stop. They spent the summer preparing, building a cradle, gathering baby clothes, and dreaming about the future. Their son was born in early December, a healthy baby boy with Isaiah's dark hair and Tabitha's eyes. They named him Jacob, after the man whose cabin had saved Tabitha's life and become the foundation of their happiness. Jacob Miller Irving came into the world screaming his displeasure at the cold, but he quieted the moment Tabitha held him, looking up at his mother with unfocused eyes that seemed to hold all the wisdom of the universe. Isaiah fell in love all over again watching Tabitha with their son, seeing the fierce tenderness in her face as she nursed him and sang soft lullabies. She was an amazing mother, patient and loving and strong, and Isaiah counted himself blessed beyond measure. The years rolled on, each one bringing new joys and challenges. In 1887, Isaiah finally saved enough to buy 100 acres of land adjacent to the Rocking M. Marcus sold it to him at a fair price, and they began building a proper ranch house, larger than the cabin with multiple bedrooms and a real kitchen. They kept the cabin, though, unable to let go of the place where their love had begun. Their daughter, Sarah, was born in 1888, a tiny thing with red hair that came from some distant ancestor neither could name. She was followed by another son, Thomas, in 1890, and finally a second daughter, Emily, in 1893. The house was full of noise and laughter, of children running through the rooms and climbing trees and learning to ride horses as soon as they could walk. Tabitha thrived as a mother and rancher's wife, but she never lost the core of steel that had allowed her to survive that terrible winter. She taught their daughters to shoot and ride and speak their minds, refusing to let them be constrained by societal expectations. She taught their sons to cook and mend and respect women as equals. Isaiah supported her fully, having learned long ago that Tabitha's way of doing things often turned out to be the right way. The ranch prospered slowly but steadily. Isaiah had a good eye for cattle and a reputation for honest dealing that served him well. Tabitha's sewing business grew into a small dress shop in town, run by a young woman she trained, with Tabitha designing and overseeing production. The money from both ventures allowed them to expand, to hire hands, to become established members of the community. They faced hardships, as all families did. There were droughts and harsh winters, sick cattle and broken fences. Thomas nearly died from pneumonia when he was 5, saved only by 3 days and nights of Tabitha refusing to leave his side. A fire destroyed their barn in 1895, taking a season's worth of hay with it. But they weathered each storm together, their love a constant foundation on which everything else was built. As the century drew to a close, Isaiah found himself reflecting on the strange path his life had taken. He was 42 years old, the father of 4, the owner of a successful ranch. He had a wife he loved more with each passing year, children who filled his days with purpose, and a place in a community that respected him. It was more than he had ever dreamed possible back when he was a frightened 14-year-old boy running from his father's fists. On a cool evening in October 1899, Isaiah sat on the porch of their house watching the sun set over their land. The cattle were lowing in the distance, and he could hear Tabitha inside putting the younger children to bed. Jacob, now 14, was in the barn checking on a mare that was due to foal any day. Sarah was reading by lamplight in her room, lost in one of the novels she devoured like candy. Tabitha emerged from the house and settled into the chair beside him, taking his hand in hers. Her hair had threads of silver now, and there were lines around her eyes from years of squinting into the sun. But to Isaiah, she was more beautiful than the shivering girl he had found in that cabin 17 years ago. "What are you thinking about?" Tabitha asked, her thumb rubbing gentle circles on the back of his hand. "Everything," Isaiah said. "Nothing, just how lucky I am." Tabitha smiled. "We both are, lucky and blessed and grateful." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge one by one in the darkening sky. Isaiah thought about that January day in 1883, about the blizzard and the abandoned cabin and the decision to stop and check rather than ride on by. Such a small choice, and it had changed everything. "You ever think about what might have happened?" he asked quietly. "If I had not stopped at the cabin that day." Tabitha was quiet for a long moment. "I try not to," she finally said. "I would have died, most likely, frozen to death before morning, or survived and been dragged back to Hutchins, which might have been worse. But you did stop. You saw someone in need and you helped without asking for anything in return. That is who you are, Isaiah Irving, and that is one of the 1,000 reasons I love you." "I fell in love with you that day," Isaiah confessed. "I did not realize it then, but looking back, I think some part of me knew. The way you looked at me, so fierce and frightened and determined to survive, you were extraordinary." "We both were," Tabitha said. "We both are. 2 people who refused to accept the hand fate dealt us, who fought for something better. And we won. We built this life out of nothing, out of a frozen cabin and a stack of firewood and 5 words. This place is yours now," Isaiah murmured, remembering. "Yes," Tabitha agreed. "And it still is. All of this, everything we have built, it is ours and nobody can take it away." As if summoned by their words, Jacob emerged from the barn, waving excitedly. The mare had her foal, healthy colt, already standing. Isaiah and Tabitha rose together, moving to meet their son and inspect the new addition to their herd. As they walked across the yard hand in hand, Isaiah felt a deep contentment settle in his bones. This was what he had been searching for his whole life without knowing it. Not wealth or fame or adventure, but this. A home, a family, a love that endured through all the trials the world could throw at it. The new century arrived with celebration and optimism. Fort Stockton had grown from a rough frontier town into an established community with schools and churches, and even a telephone line. The Irving Ranch was known throughout the region for its quality cattle and the fair treatment of its workers. Isaiah and Tabitha's children were growing into remarkable young adults, each with their own dreams and ambitions. Jacob, at 15, had his father's work ethic and his mother's sharp mind. He was already talking about going to the agricultural college in College Station, wanting to learn modern ranching techniques to bring back to the family operation. Sarah, at 12, had inherited her mother's talent for sewing and design, but also her father's love of horses. She spent every free moment in the barn or riding the range, dreaming of breeding horses alongside the cattle operation. Thomas, at 10, was the thoughtful one, always reading and asking questions about how things worked. Emily, the baby at 7, was pure sunshine, brightening every room she entered with her laughter and boundless energy. Watching his children grow and flourish filled Isaiah with a pride he could barely contain. But it was the quiet moments with Tabitha that he treasured most. They still found time to sit together by the fire in the evenings, just the two of them, talking about everything and nothing the way they had in the early days. The passion between them had never dimmed, and even after 17 years of marriage, Isaiah still felt his heart skip when Tabitha smiled at him in a certain way. In the summer of 1902, they received word that Garrett Hutchins had finally been hanged after years of appeals. The news arrived by telegram, and Isaiah expected to feel satisfaction or vindication. Instead, he felt only a weary relief that the man could hurt no one else. Tabitha said nothing when he told her, just nodded and went back to her sewing. They had moved so far beyond that dark chapter that Hutchins was barely even a memory. That same summer brought a different kind of news. Clara Jennings, Tabitha's friend from town, had fallen ill. Cancer, the doctor said, and there was nothing to be done. Tabitha spent weeks at Clara's bedside, caring for her friend as the sickness took its inevitable toll. When Clara died in August, Tabitha mourned deeply, reminded of how fragile life was and how important it was to cherish every moment. The funeral was well attended, and afterward, Tabitha took Isaiah's hand and led him to the cemetery on the hill overlooking Fort Stockton. They stood together looking at the rows of headstones, some old and weathered, others new and raw. "Promise me something," Tabitha said quietly. "Anything," Isaiah replied, meaning it absolutely. "When my time comes, whenever that is, I want to be buried here. I want to look out over this town that became my home, this place where we built our life together. And I want you beside me when your time comes." Isaiah pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her temple. "I promise. But let us not think about such things now. We have many years ahead of us yet." And they did. The years continued to unfold with all their joys and sorrows. Jacob went off to college as planned, returning 2 years later with new ideas and a sweetheart, a smart young woman named Helen who won the family over immediately. They married in 1904, and by 1905, Isaiah and Tabitha were grandparents to a squalling baby girl named Elizabeth. Sarah surprised everyone by moving to Dallas at 18, where she opened a riding school for young ladies. Her letters home were full of excitement about her students and the life she was building. Thomas followed his brother to college, studying engineering with plans to bring electricity and modern conveniences to rural areas. Emily, the baby, showed signs of becoming a talented artist, her sketches and paintings covering the walls of the house. Through it all, Isaiah and Tabitha remained the center around which the family orbited. They were partners in every sense of the word, making decisions together, supporting each other through difficulties, celebrating victories as a team. Their love had deepened over the decades, becoming something solid and unshakable, the bedrock on which 3 generations now stood. In 1910, as they celebrated their 28th wedding anniversary, Isaiah took Tabitha back to the old cabin. They had kept it maintained over the years, unable to let it fall into disrepair despite having no practical need for it. Tabitha had decorated it with curtains and quilts, turning it into a cozy retreat where they sometimes escaped when the main house became too noisy. They spent the afternoon there, reminiscing about those early days. Isaiah rebuilt the fire in the same fireplace where he had first warmed Tabitha's frozen body. They sat together on the floor where they had played cards and fallen in love, their hands intertwined, their heads close together. "Do you remember what you said to me?" Tabitha asked, her voice soft with memory. "That first day when the storm finally broke and you came back with supplies." Isaiah thought back, sifting through decades of memories. "I said a lot of things." "You said this place was mine now," Tabitha reminded him. "And I did not understand what you meant, not really. I thought you just meant the cabin, but it was so much more than that, was it not?" Isaiah nodded slowly. "I think I was saying you were free. That you had a place in this world that was yours by right, not by permission. That you could build whatever life you wanted. And I built it with you," Tabitha said, turning to look at him. Her eyes were still as dark and bright as they had been at 22, though now they held decades of shared experience. "Everything good in my life started in this cabin. You gave me more than shelter and warmth. You gave me hope. You gave me a future. You gave me love without conditions or expectations. You just gave." Isaiah felt his throat tighten with emotion. "You gave me just as much. You showed me what it meant to be brave, to fight for what matters. You made me a better man, Tabitha. Everything I am, everything we have built, it is because of you." They kissed there in the cabin, surrounded by ghosts of their younger selves, and it felt like both a beginning and a continuation. The same passion, but tempered now with understanding and history. The same love, but deeper, richer, more complex. As the sun set and the cabin grew dark around them, Isaiah built up the fire and they lay together on a pile of blankets, watching the flames dance. Tabitha's head rested on his chest, and he could feel her heartbeat slow and steady against his side. "We did good, did we not?" Tabitha murmured, already half asleep. "We did better than good," Isaiah replied, holding her close. "We did extraordinary. The years that followed were gentle ones, the kind that come when life's major battles have been fought and won." The ranch continued to prosper under Jacob's management, with Isaiah stepping back to an advisory role. Thomas brought electricity to their land in 1913, one of the first ranches in the area to have it, and the wonder of being able to flip a switch and have light never quite faded for Isaiah and Tabitha, who remembered so clearly the days of firelight and oil lamps. Sarah returned to Fort Stockton in 1915 with her own family in tow, ready to establish a satellite location of her riding school. Emily married a local teacher and settled in town, where she taught art to children and painted landscapes that hung in homes throughout the county. By 1920, Isaiah and Tabitha had 8 grandchildren ranging from toddlers to teenagers, and the house was never quiet when they came to visit. Isaiah spent his days teaching the older ones to ride and rope, passing down skills he had honed over a lifetime. Tabitha gathered the younger ones in the kitchen, teaching them to bake and sew and garden just as she had once learned herself. They were growing old together, their hair now completely silver, their movements a bit slower, their faces deeply lined. But their love remained as strong as ever, perhaps stronger for having weathered every storm. They still held hands when they walked, still kissed goodnight before sleeping, still found reasons to laugh together every single day. In the spring of 1923, on a morning so beautiful it seemed painted by an artist's hand, Isaiah woke to find Tabitha lying very still beside him. For one terrible moment his heart stopped, but then she opened her eyes and smiled at him, and he breathed again. "Good morning," she said, her voice a bit weaker than it had been, a bit more fragile. "Good morning, my love," Isaiah replied, brushing a strand of silver hair from her face. They rose slowly, helping each other as they had learned to do, and made their way to the kitchen where Tabitha started coffee and Isaiah cooked eggs and bacon. It was a routine they had perfected over 40 years, a domestic dance that required no thought or discussion. After breakfast, they walked out to the porch and sat in their chairs, looking out over the land they had built together. The morning was cool and clear, and in the distance they could see cattle grazing peacefully. Jacob's house was visible across the way, smoke rising from its chimney. Grandchildren's laughter floated on the breeze from somewhere nearby. "It is a good life," Tabitha said, taking Isaiah's hand. "The best," Isaiah agreed, squeezing gently. They sat in comfortable silence, and Isaiah felt a peace settle over him that was almost transcendent. He thought about the terrified boy he had been, running from his father's house. He thought about the frozen woman he had found in an abandoned cabin. He thought about all the choices and chances and moments of grace that had brought them to this porch this morning, this perfect culmination of a life well lived. "Thank you," Tabitha said suddenly. Isaiah looked at her in surprise. "For what?" "For stopping that day," she said, her eyes glistening with tears that did not fall. "For building a fire. For saying those words. For giving me a life I never dreamed I could have. For loving me so completely that I never once doubted my worth or my place in this world." Isaiah raised her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "Thank you for being brave enough to survive, for choosing to live, for loving me back, for building this family and this home and this beautiful, beautiful life with me." They sat together as the sun climbed higher, warming their faces, and neither felt the need to speak further. Everything that mattered had been said in words and actions over the course of 40 years. Their story was complete, not because it was ending, but because it had fulfilled every promise those early days had held. The seasons turned as they always did, bringing summer heat and autumn colors and winter cold. Isaiah and Tabitha moved a bit slower with each passing year, but they moved together, always together. Their children and grandchildren surrounded them with love and care, ensuring their final years were comfortable and full of joy. In the winter of 1926, on a day very much like the one when they had first met, a blizzard rolled through Fort Stockton. It was nowhere near as severe as the storm of 1883, but it brought back memories sharp as glass. Isaiah and Tabitha sat by the fire in their house, wrapped in quilts, watching the snow fall outside their window. 43 years, Tabitha said, shaking her head in wonder. "It has been 43 years since you found me." "Best decision I ever made," Isaiah said, his voice rough with age but still strong. "Stopping at that cabin, finding you. Saving me," Tabitha added. "No," Isaiah corrected gently. "You saved yourself. I just held the door open." Tabitha leaned against his shoulder, and they watched the storm together. Two old people who had loved each other through everything life could throw at them. When the snow stopped and the sun emerged, painting the world in shades of white and gold, they were still sitting there, still together, still in love. Their story continued for several more years, filled with the quiet joys of great-grandchildren and the satisfaction of seeing everything they had built continue to flourish. When Tabitha passed peacefully in her sleep in the spring of 1929, at the age of 68, Isaiah mourned deeply, but without bitterness. They had been blessed with 45 years of marriage, longer than many couples got, and every single day had been a gift. He buried her on the hill overlooking Fort Stockton, just as she had asked, with a headstone that read simply, "Tabitha Irving, beloved wife, mother, and grandmother. 1861–1929. She chose freedom. Isaiah lived another 3 years, cared for by his children and surrounded by family. He spent his final days telling stories to his grandchildren and great-grandchildren, making sure they knew where they came from and what their grandmother had endured and accomplished. He wanted them to understand that the comfortable lives they led had been built on courage and love, and the simple decision to help someone in need. When he died in the summer of 1932, at the age of 76, he was laid to rest beside Tabitha on the hill. His headstone read, Isaiah Irving, beloved husband, father, and grandfather, 1856-1932. He built the fire. The ranch continued under Jacob's stewardship and eventually passed to his children and then to their children. The old cabin where it all began was preserved as a family landmark, and every generation heard the story of the blizzard, and the fire, and the 5 words that changed everything. This place is yours now. It became a family tradition to visit the cabin on the anniversary of that January day in 1883. Dozens of descendants would gather there, lighting a fire in the old fireplace and sharing stories of Isaiah and Tabitha. They talked about love and courage and the importance of helping those in need. They talked about building lives that mattered, about choosing freedom, about fighting for what was right even when it was hard. The town of Fort Stockton erected a small plaque in the town square in 1950, commemorating the Irvings and their contributions to the community. It told a simplified version of their story, leaving out some of the harder details but capturing the essential truth. That one act of kindness in a blizzard had created ripples that spread across generations. The Irving family ranch prospered into the 21st century, adapting to changing times but never forgetting its roots. The descendants of Isaiah and Tabitha became teachers and ranchers, artists and engineers, doctors and lawyers, spreading across Texas and beyond. But many returned to Fort Stockton for weddings and funerals, for holidays and reunions, drawn back to the place where their family story began. And always, when they gathered in the old cabin with its carefully maintained fireplace and its quilted decorations, someone would tell the story again. The story of a cowboy who stopped to check an abandoned building during a blizzard. The story of a woman who chose death over slavery and found life instead. The story of a fire that warmed more than just frozen flesh, that sparked a love which burned bright for over 4 decades and created a legacy that would endure for generations. This place is yours now, Isaiah had said, and he had been more right than he could have known. Not just the cabin, but everything it represented, freedom and safety and love and home, the chance to build something beautiful from the ruins of despair, the opportunity to create a future out of courage and kindness. That was the true inheritance Isaiah and Tabitha left behind. Not just land or money or possessions, but the example of 2 people who refused to accept the roles the world tried to force on them, who fought for each other and for a better life, who built something lasting and true from the simplest of materials, a fire, a cabin, and a love that conquered everything in its path. Their story became legend in Fort Stockton, told and retold until it was hard to separate fact from embellishment. But the core remained true. A man found a woman shivering in an empty cabin in the middle of a blizzard. He started a fire to warm her. He told her the place was hers. And from that moment of grace came a love story that spanned nearly half a century, a family that grew to number in the hundreds, and a legacy of courage and compassion that echoed down through the generations. In the end, that was what mattered. Not the hardships they had faced or the enemies they had defeated, but the life they had built together, the children they had raised and the love they had shared. The simple extraordinary fact that when faced with a choice between riding past or stopping to help, Isaiah Irving had chosen to stop, and Tabitha Foster had chosen to live. And those two choices, made in the space of heartbeats during a winter storm in 1883, had changed the world in ways neither could have possibly imagined. The fire Isaiah built that day had long since burned out, reduced to ash and memory. But its warmth lingered on, passed down from parent to child, from grandparent to grandchild, an eternal flame of hope and love that would never be extinguished. Because some fires, once lit, burn forever in the hearts of those who remember. And the Irving family would never forget the day a cowboy and a woman met in a cabin during a blizzard and built something that would last far beyond their mortal years. "This place is yours now," he had said. And it was. For both of them, for their children, for generations yet unborn. A place of safety and love and endless possibility. A home built on the foundation of a single act of kindness and the love that grew from it. That was the true story of Isaiah and Tabitha Irving, and it was a story that would be told as long as there were Irvings to tell it, a testament to the power of compassion and the enduring nature of true love.